18 years old. Better than going to Vietnam, man.
Desiree, glad to see you have on sensible shoes today.
Great. Good morning, everyone.
I learned.
It's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, April 4th, 2023. We're in City Council chambers. I'd like to call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Item number 2 is citizens' comments.
Mr. Klaus is our only speaker. to my
Mr.
knowledge.
Klaus?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is that, okay.
I'm hoping that the council will install the old procedure protocol. What we used to do is like say your name and what your address is, if you wouldn't mind, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Al Klaus, 3 Grand Pavilion, Isle of Palms. City Council meeting on 3/28, we requested assurances in writing our administration will enforce noise ordinance 925. We're still awaiting the requested document. On 3/6, Mrs. Hack stated the first phase of the sound study from the resort would be completed the week of 3/13. Nothing received at this point. Since our last meeting on 3/6, we have called the police 4 times, noise and traffic violations. We are not aware of any citations issued. The resort is unable or unwilling to police themselves. We contend this further demonstrates Sweetgrass is not concerned regarding residents, city council, or public safety committee. We believe it is time to hold all parties of a contract accountable for noise violation. Blocking 57th Avenue in the fire lane is unacceptable. On March 21st, we provided all of you a video regarding comparing an iPhone app with a standardized sound level meter. You will remember it, the phone app was 14 dBAs higher than the sound meter, which does comply, the meter complies with AN SI S1.4 Type 2 testing standards. We challenge you to perform your own comparison. Our complaints over the last 2 years are predicated on said sound meter. Frankly, you do not need a noise meter when the external noise from the Sweetgrass penetrates inside your home when your high-impact windows and doors are closed. When you're laying in bed hearing every note, all the hooping and hollering, unable to sleep. Mrs. Hack stated on 3/6 she is willing to do, quote, whatever is necessary within the confines allowing Sweetgrass to operate as a hotel. What does this mean? What would this look like? If the answer to the above is status quo, we are not interested. We find it interesting the resort expects the residents to accept their behavior as compared to the resort changing its behavior. Does the word hotel allow one to abuse others? Mrs. Hack previously commented the rooftop bar and the ballroom doors do not open during an event. We have numerous videos demonstrating this is not an accurate statement. We contend a majority of council members, the administration, and Mrs. Hack have not experienced an afternoon at the theme park during peak season, followed up by an evening event at the rooftop bar or ballroom. Until you experience what we experience on a daily basis, you have no clue what we are exposed to. No clue. Visiting in off-season can give one a sense, and fortunately, we have had a few council members visiting the site in the past, not in peak season, however. The noise abuse from the Sweetgrass is very detrimental to our health. We have presented City Council and this committee an abundance of facts regarding noise and related health issues. As the majority of surrounding areas are implementing restrictive noise ordinances, we are opening the floodgates. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
He's
Anyone
the
else?
person that- No, sir.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is approval of the previous meeting's minutes of March 6th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any changes, additions? There being none, all in favor? Motion passes. We go into old business. Presentation from parking management vendor.
Good morning.
I am not the parking vendor, but I will introduce Pivot Parking, who we've been working with, and they have provided information to the city. We have Tina Reed and Jared Glass here from Pivot Parking. They have a presentation that they'll show you.
And for those watching, the presentation is available on the website next to the meeting agenda, and I emailed you all a copy so that you could follow it if you want to on your iPad. It will be displayed in the screens today here.
Good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Tina Reed with Pivot Parking. I'm the Executive Vice President.
Talking to the mic.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, we have folks watching, and so these meetings are live streamed via YouTube, so they pick up the noise from
Okay.
the sound from the mic.
Perfect. I am Tina Reed with Pivot Parking, and I am the EVP for South Carolina and North Carolina. And this is Jared Class.
I'm Jerry Glass, the area manager for Coastal South Carolina.
We appreciate you allowing us to come in and present this presentation. Let's see. We're just going to quickly discuss about who is Pivot, what do we do, our experience and regarding parking management, on-street operations, permit management, analytics, and additional services that we may offer. Who is Pivot? Oh, where'd it go? There we go.
There you are.
Who is Pivot? Pivot Parking, we established our parking company in late 2020. Our executive team with Pivot Parking has 60-plus years combined experience with all of our executive team. We are locally based in South Carolina. We have a regional office in Greenville, South Carolina, and our district manager here, Jared, is based in Charleston. We operate currently 30 locations within South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. And a lot of our locations are coastal municipal environments: North Myrtle Beach, Surfside Beach, South Carolina, Surf City, North Carolina, Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach, North Carolina, and we were just recently awarded the Morrison Yard office and resident complex in downtown Charleston. So our specialty is coastal on-street. We do a lot of that and have a lot of experience in relation to coastal communities. And currently we have about 100 pivotal, what we call pivotal players within our team. Our vision is to provide parking management solutions, and our motto is to allow customers to park fast, park easy, and park safe. And how do we do that? By offering services that allow for the customers to know where they can park, how they can park, how to pay, the easy and convenience of payment, and making sure that their environments are safe. In our mission, we try to serve our clients and customers in our best value standards and making sure we're exhibiting our core values daily. Our executive team consists of Scott Diggs, who is based in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. He's a co-founder and CEO. He has been in the parking industry for 30-plus years. Paul Atkinson is also a co-founder, and he's a serial entrepreneur and has a lot of background in tech companies. Myself, and I've been in the parking industry for 17 years, and then Brandon Lauterbach is our executive VP in Virginia, and he has over 20 years experience. Our senior operations team here locally throughout South Carolina, we have a vast amount of folks who are available to give service and assistance in all of our different areas. So we're happy to have such a great team with us. And it's like we said, Wrightsville Beach. We operate 1,835 spaces in Wrightsville Beach. We do text to park, the Flowbird app, Parkion pay stations, very similar to what you have here. We do all of the residential permit program, contractor parking, all of that for Wrightsville Beach. Same thing with Carolina Beach, and we do about 1,300 space management there. Surfside Beach, we were just recently awarded this year and began operations in January. North Myrtle Beach, we've been there now for 2 years and operate over 2,000 spaces there. We also do Surf City, North Carolina, which is unique, and Surfside is followed in, and it's funny, we have Surf City and Surfside, but they follow in that they are now completely equipmentless operations. They have no pay stations. They do all of their payments by the text to park feature or the mobile app. So we have no equipment in any of those locations. The Metropolitan Garage in Greenville is a new Class A residential complex we were just awarded. We also do in downtown Greenville, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Camperdown mixed-use project. It incorporates 3 garages over a whole city block. And then again, the Morrison Yard project that we were just awarded. Other locations, again, we have over 30 locations that we currently manage. We currently manage over 15,000 spaces. In 2022, we managed over $22 million in gross revenue for all of our clients. What is parking management? Our little model here on the left is what we believe our parking management ecosystem is, making sure that our parking management is implementing the industry best practices with tried and true experience, making sure that we do customer service is first and foremost, making sure that customers understand where they can park, how do you pay to park, what are the rules, what are the regulations. We call our staff ambassadors first. We make sure that we train our enforcement staff as ambassadors to make sure they're giving out the proper information, and then citations are second. Staffing and enforcement, again, making sure that we hire personalities. Most people don't have parking experience, so we hire that personality that we know that can convey those rules and regulations appropriately. Collections and accounting, we'll talk a little bit further about trying to be fully transparent with all of our collections and accounting practices. We also provide the equipment, sign maintenance, and updates. We have the Parkeon pay stations that you currently operate. We have those Parkeon pay stations in North Myrtle Beach, in Wrightsville Beach, in Carolina Beach. So we operate currently, I think it's about 75 to 100 of those machines right now. And then permit management and then consulting and guidance as part of our ecosystem. I'm gonna let Jared talk about on-street operations.
Yeah, we'll go into a little bit of the on-street operations, go through the payment options that you currently have, the enforcement with the LPR, which is what we proposed to the city. Some of the enforcement zones that we'll go through and we set out through the town, the citation portal and the collection letters that we go through, the equipment maintenance, and then some signage updates that we will propose as well. So your first option that you have is the pay by text through the Flowbird. We commend the city for doing this. I believe you rolled it out towards the middle of last summer. That is the future of the parking, is the contactless and the customer using their own phone. You don't have to come back to your vehicle to add time. You don't have to go back to your vehicle to put a receipt on the dash. It's all done by your license plate. There's no app to download. You just text a code to a number and put your plate number and your payment stuff in, and you're good to go. What we've had seen, especially in our Surf City location, is the longer stays that people are doing. Since they don't have to come back, they can text it right from their phone, they stay longer, and they pay more. Your second option is the actual Flowbird app that you download. Again, you put in a zone number, your license plate. This is a physical app on your phone that you would download. You put your credit card information in, and I think you guys do the pay to play with that as well, and you start your session that way. It works similar with the text to park, where you don't have to come back to the vehicle, but it is an app to download on the phone. And then, as we said too, the Parkeon pay stations. They're aging. They've been out there a while, and what we've seen, and as a current trend in the parking industry, is they're moving away from the equipment. It's all going contactless with the QR codes, that kind of thing. We did propose the LPR in our proposals to the city, and we would say to transfer these stations over to a pay-by-plate system, so that would work with the LPR, and that's just a quick fix, a software download to these machines. And then on-street enforcement and staffing. Did you want to go into this?
So enforcement, part of enforcement with parking management is making sure that those that abide by your ordinances and make sure that they follow the rules. Currently, with parking enforcement, where we do at all of our on-street locations, we provide the staffing based on that for the full enforcement for the hours of paid parking and for the non-paid environment that you also have for the right-of-way parking. Currently, the police department uses a T2 enforcement system. We recommended in our proposal to switch over to a different platform that we have had a lot of success. However, if there were to be a transition, we want you to know that we are flexible. If you want to maintain and stay with that T2 system, that is perfectly fine. We have experience with that system. There would be no change with that if possible, if you wanted to do that. But we do have experience with the other, which we call IPS and passport enforcement. We also have experience in related to the online citation portal where customers can go online, make their payment for their citations. And then we also, for scofflaws, with those that have unpaid citations that are overdue, we also have the abilities, if your ordinances allow us, to do booting with traditional booting. And now there's also a digital boot where we actually apply the boot. It has a code. They call, they make a telephone call, pay their fine over the phone. They're given a code to release that boot. That means the customer can take that boot off their car and drop it in a drop box. They don't have to wait on someone to come remove the boot. So it's fairly quickly. We also, around in this environment, we are, and as I believe as the police department already uses LSVs and that type of thing, that would be the most beneficial so that you can get in and out and amongst the traffic and be able to get to where we need to get to. License plate recognition. So we proposed in our proposal what we use, and we use license plate recognition enforcement in all of our municipal locations right now. We have a license plate recognition system. It's 2 cameras that are installed on top of golf carts primarily with a dashboard tablet that allows us, the cameras then as we're going through, it is connecting to the payment platforms that are utilized, letting the system know who has paid and who has not paid, and then it is a quicker and more efficient so that we're driving through and it's giving us, if there's an indication that someone hasn't paid, it does woo, 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 and it lets that person know. Then that enforcement officer gets out, double checks, makes sure, and completes the citation. So it helps to be a little bit more efficient in that process so that they're not having to get out, actually manually type in a license plate, that type of thing. We did recommend in our proposal, Pivot Parking is offering to provide one of these LPR units at no cost upon negotiation of a longer-term contract. We do enforcement routes, so we like to, when we have our staff, we zone it out so that we make sure our team are completing the whole area of enforcement, and zone that out. And then we also rotate that staff so that no staff is just in one zone at all times, and we rotate throughout the city so that everyone gets an understanding of the environment that they need to be working in. Job duties for our enforcement team include maintenance of the equipment as well, making sure that we train our staff. You know, if there's an error code, how do you go fix that error code? What do you do if there's a paper jam, anything like that? On weekends, we proposed full coverage with a full-time operations manager and a weekend supervisor because that is just what is needed and what we have found to be successful in our other operations. Permit management. You offer permits for your residents, non-residents, and such. So we do permit management for all of our current municipal operations. We do in Carolina Beach and in Surfside and in Surf City, we do digital residential registrations. Means they don't have a decal. Their license plate becomes their registration as part of the LPR system. So there's no decal to be issued to that vehicle. It's all recognized by their license plates. We also manage the hurricane reentry decals for many of the locations. We do contractor permits and such. Some locations have chose to continue with decals and hang tags, but we offer that as an option within our parking management and within the online portal, whether it be with your current system or a new system. Staffing, again, all of our staff go through a background check and MVR check to meet our standards. They also are required to wear the high-vis DOT required uniforms. We also complete vehicle and golf cart certifications for all of our employees, making sure that they have completed a safe driving test and those type of things. We try to hire based on our core values, trying to always be resourceful, be respectful to yourself first and everyone else, being responsive, being resilient, and being realistic. Staffing, we again propose to be a full-time operations manager for your environment. That full-time operations manager, even though your season is only March to October, there are things that occur on the outside of a year-round. Collections of citations still continue to come in, making sure that we're doing the necessary consulting to provide you with the expectations and the data so that you can make informed decisions. Assistant weekend supervisor, and then a multitude of part-time, full-time enforcement ambassadors to fulfill the needs, an office admin to answer telephone calls and be that in-person assistance, and then we do accountant support from a remote environment. Staffing positions, again, our enforcement ambassadors patrol the designated areas. One of our first things is being an ambassador. We make sure that they have brochures, if there's information that they need to make sure in our training and orientation, that we make sure that they know about where the businesses are, where the information is, where you need to direct someone, because they are the eyes and ears for the public. So if they're asking a question, where do I go for this? Where do I go for that? We're making sure that we make sure that they have the most appropriate information. Collections and reporting. To the right is a delinquent violation. As part of the parking management, we would also employ that we would send out all the delinquent notices on behalf of the city, making sure that we do the DMV registered owner lookups so that we get those those mailing addresses so that we can send out collection letters based on your ordinances and based on state law, which requires a 30-day period before you can send out a letter. And then month-end reporting, we are very transparent in making sure that we would provide you financial reporting at the end of every month, showing what the gross revenues are, showing what the expenses are, based on the model that you may choose of parking management. Analytics, at every one of our locations, we do quarterly meetings or quarterly presentations and annual presentations to city council and to committees, making sure that you have great knowledge, because that's the story. That's where your story is told through all of your data, and that's where you're able to make those informed decisions based on what is best for your parking environment. Signage. One of the things that we feel like we have done very well in most of our municipal locations has gone in and made recommendations to update signage, to make sure that the signage is cohesive throughout the town, that it represents the town and that represents the city and what your rules and regulations are. Instead of having multiple signs that say different things, is having it cohesive to have everything on one sign. Gives you the hours that enforcement is done, gives you what the rates are. Then it tells you what your payment options are on that particular signage. And from a safety standpoint, all of our signs also tell you exactly what location you are at, what street you're on, so that if you have an emergency, they can say, look at the sign, and that lets you know where you are. Additional services that we may offer. We can help create a dedicated parking website if necessary. Consulting, we will always be your consultant at no additional charge. So whatever needs you have in regards to a parking environment within our capabilities, we will always provide that to you at no cost. Social media advertising, we can help with any social media advertising. Again, I know that, if it backs up on the coming into the island and such, we can help with all that social media. I know that you already have some of that going on now, but we can be of assistance where necessary. The newest thing coming about is fixed camera enforcement, which is fixed cameras at certain areas, kind of like the toll booth kind of mentality. If you go through a camera on the road at a toll booth and then it sends you a letter in the mail that you didn't pay, that's kind of the next generation of enforcement that's coming out. Some cities have adopted that, some have not, because there's a little lag time then in receiving your citation payment or your payment for parking. But that is something new that's come out. And then EV charging stations. That is something new as well. EV charging is here to stay. So we can assist you in finding that best method and the best type of EV charging stations, and if there's any grants or anything that can help you with those, purchasing of those as well. The proposed fee structure that we offered in our proposal, we offered two options. One being a typical, normal base management fee type environment where we charge a base management fee as our fee for services, and then we share in a gross revenue, and our suggestion was 6.25% over a threshold of $750,000. So we don't share in any revenue until you receive the first $750,000, and then we would share in that. And this is all negotiable. So this is just our offering within our proposal. And under this type of arrangement, all the normal and customary expenses are considered pass-through expenses and paid out of gross revenues. We did not also make any, and within our proposal, we did not make any suggestions for any rate changes. We feel like it would be better benefiting to you for us to come in, get control of the operation, get that information, get that data, and then come back to you with all that information for you to make a better decision about what potential rates could be. The second offering that we provided in our proposal was an all-inclusive, meaning that we would charge you 29.5% of all gross revenues, and then we would pay all expenses out of that, and that you'd have no other pass-through expenses based on what our contract negotiations were. in full transparency, there are expenses that are related to the startup of a new vendor. And so we just want to make sure that we were transparent. If you were to choose to change some of the platforms that we had recommended, there would be some costs associated with that. So we just want to make sure that that was within our proposal as well. We also did not include in our proposal any of the golf cart vehicle type of equipment that would be required, assuming that that was already within the program right now. And that is it for us. So we have a saying, we always like to say parking is not rocket science, but there is a science to it. So we will say that we'll be your scientists in helping you find your solutions. So we appreciate your time and open for any questions.
I got some questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to run through all of them based upon your presentations when they came into my mind. You talked a little bit about times of enforcement. How do you deal with off-hour enforcement? And for instance, we just had, just this past weekend, a short-term rental, and they can only have 6 cars at that rental location, but only from 9 a.m. to, I think it's, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m.
No, it's 11, isn't it?
So that,
11
so,
p.m. Peninsula?
Whatever, it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
As what, as far as the timing, but during a period of time, they can only have 6 cars. The rest of the day, they can have more cars than that. And so they've got all these cars that are at the short-term rental, and then come the magic time, whether it's 9 p.m. or 11 p.m., they move to our public parking and just hide the cars there. So during the night, they're hiding. And so that is an issue as far as enforcement, because one of the issues we have is too many vehicles on the island. And we're trying to train people that instead of everybody driving their car to a short-term rental, y'all pull up a little bit and, and go together. So that type of an issue, and there are also other issues. There are issues with people that store cars at night on Palm Boulevard. And so how do we deal with that off hours?
I think, for the purpose of our proposal was engaging just when the normal customary hours were. It would be something that we would be open to discussion and with the town and with the police into how do we work together in that? Is it where we provide someone later in that evening to help assist with those type of enforcement issues so that the police can deal with more pressing issues? So that is something that we can definitely discuss further.
And we would maintain all the short-term rental parking maximum, and we would still enforce that with our livability officer, not necessarily with the parking management company. And then we would still have officers working to look in the parking lots, but even the lots after 8 p.m., it's no charge to park in the lots. And as long as they are off the roadway by 9 a.m., they can park in the residential without a residential parking tag.
Yep.
So
Currently,
we would help with that.
yeah, currently, but that may or may not change. Office space, you need office space on the island,
Yes,
and we provide that?
that would be a part of the contract negotiation.
And how much space do you need?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. We'd like to have, because we like to have the public be able to come in, so it needs to be an adequate space. But believe me, we have operated he used to be in Beaufort, North Carolina, and his office was a broom closet at
Okay.
one point. So, so there has been, we have worked in the smallest of smallest spaces, but, we like just for it to be adequate enough for staff to come in, to get their equipment, to go back out, for customers to come in. So it doesn't have to be extremely large, just adequate enough to do that daily
Well,
operation.
behind you is the old holding cell for court. We can stick you in there.
My office there was a jail cell.
I'm looking for a recommendation on this one. Everybody handles it differently, and this is just me. This has not been discussed by anybody, but one of the issues that I see that we have is time limits for how much time can you park in a space, because we want to encourage more people to be able to come.
Wanna encourage
And so we got to encourage turnover. What do y'all recommend in a beach environment for time limits?
currently in some of our beach environments, there is a mix. There is, hey, park as long as you want. If you want to pay that fee, you park it and stay there. It depends on what the demand and what the need is. In a core business district, so to speak, there can be particular time limits. I relate it to just like a restaurant where you want to turn a table, you want to turn a space. And so if you put a time limit on that space, theoretically, the 2-hour period's kind of the magic number. Most of the part is 2 hours, because by the time you go get a reservation, you stand in line and you eat, it's been about 2 hours. Some towns, the cities decide to go about 3 hours. But in that core district, there can be time limits so that creates that turnover. It would be something that we would need to just explore further as to what areas would make sense for a time limit constraint and what areas would not.
Okay. I could see your guys out there in the golf carts at times having an interaction with the public that escalates. How do y'all deal with that?
So
Do
in
y'all
all
call
of
the
our
police, or what
all
do
of
you
our
do?
orientation, we require de-escalation training, and most of our training is that, if our safety of our employees is first and foremost. So our instructions to our employee is first, don't engage. Okay, if someone is irate because they've received a citation, be specific. Is that you've gotten a citation? If you don't agree, you have the right to appeal. You can either do that in person or you can do that online. So give them the information that is needed, but don't engage. And if it becomes to a point to where you don't feel safe, you remove yourself from that situation and you call for assistance and backup.
Okay, all right. And y'all would have special, I guess, or dedicated lines somehow to call the
Yeah.
police if needed. How about calls from residents? We've got a lot of residents that are gonna be looking out their window and they're gonna see that there's a violation of parking. Do y'all have a portal or something where residents can contact you?
Yep, and we would have a CSR, customer service representative, that would be taking those calls. And then that way we can engage, because then all of the enforcement ambassadors will either have a radio or a cell phone, and then that message can be relayed to them, hey, I need you to go to this area and go take a look at this.
Okay, and so all that's outside of the 911 reporting? It would
Yes.
just be straight to y'all?
Yes.
If both of your proposals are based on a percentage, you get a percentage of income based upon how many tickets you write. How do you address the argument that creates over-ticketing?
No, our proposal was not based on number of citations written. It was based on gross revenues.
Well, yeah, but the
so-
citations create revenue.
Exactly, but what we do is we don't, and again, part of our negotiation and being flexible, we have some locations where we take a percentage of all gross revenue, not including citations. So it can be a different variation. This is just kind of what we put in our proposal as to what we have done at other locations. So we are open to discussing further, but as far as, our goal is to have consistent enforcement efforts so that the public knows that they need to pay, they need to follow the rules, and to help reduce what the police has been having to do, and they have much bigger issues to deal with, so.
Okay. Do you have the ability, either with your license plate readers or however you do it, to feed either a sign on the connector or a website that shows where parking is available and where parking's full?
So we did not propose a parking availability program in our proposal. It is out there, and we can explore that. They're not extremely cheap, okay? It is a basis. The way a parking availability program works is that information that's being fed to that program has to come from your text to park environment, has to come from your app, and it cannot, typically the pay stations cannot provide that information to that kind of program because they're not connected. So providing parking availability on a sign 2 miles down may say we have 300 open spaces, but in reality, when they get there, that may not be the case. It's not always real time. There is some new technology that has come out that tries to be a little bit more real time, but it requires sensors to be installed on the ground so that it recognizes if there's a vehicle in that area. And that would be a cost that we'd have to explore because it is not relatively cheap.
Okay. And then my last question, and I thank you, you've answered everything great. If we said, yeah, this is what we want to do, how long does it take for y'all to be in place?
If there were no changes to any of the platforms, no changes, and we're just bringing staff in and starting that process, we would need about 45 days just to
Okay.
get that staffing, get that staffing hired, get that staffing orientated, trained, and ready to go. I've done it as little as 3 weeks to 30 days, and with a little soft environment to get started. But if there's absolutely no changes to any platforms, 45 days. If there are changes to platforms, because we're at the mercy of some of the vendors that have to make changes, it's typically a 60 to 90-day time period.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Let me follow up with that right away. A change to the platform would be if we go to text to park or.
Yeah, if you
something-
changed any of the payment platforms, if you changed the enforcement platform, and we'd have to set those up and make those changes, and then changing of signage. So I think, in our opinion is to get in here quickly is to make no changes.
Well, no, we want to make changes.
Okay.
So how long would it take to implement something like that? Typically from your other places, how long is it to get a system upfit like that?
The minimum 60 days.
Okay, plus, can you do the 45-day personnel training while you're getting the equipment
Yeah,
in
we're
place?
saying all in.
So 2 months.
Typically about 60. Some of
Okay.
the vendor platforms, depending on how invasive the requirement is and such, it would
This
take,
year?
90 days.
Okay,
And
But we
just,
talked about
just
next year anyway.
Yeah, and just for the record too, we have a parking enforcement system, we have a payment system, so we don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And we would propose that we would keep those systems in place and we would transfer them to them.
Yeah.
So I think, I think because we have a system in place, we have equipment, we could potentially implement this quicker. I think that the communication piece to the community it's going to be an important component of a successful operation. We're in the middle of hiring BSOs for this season, so I would have to, depending on what the goal of council is in terms of timing to implement this, we would need to go back and reevaluate whether it would be available for this year and at what point of the year. I would not want to start this mid-season.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
just from our operations, I think it would be challenging.
yeah. Changing the rules mid-season would cause a lot of animosity out
We
there,
would
that's
not-
for
We would
sure.
not recommend that. I mean,
know.
again, we could come in this season just with no changes in doing that and just have greater enforcement presence and such. That's not, we can do that. Waiting till next season to make complete changes at the beginning of each season
Okay.
is the recommendation.
I got some more. With respect to the time limit, I'm a traffic engineer, so I've
Okay.
looked at this, not as in detail like you, but there's some things I know. You can usually control that with the fee structure. So I know the county park right now, they charge $20 a day to stay there. So once you're there, everything, as long as you stay, it's free, basically. And there are other parks, they charge by the hour, and they find out they have more turnover by the hour than they do for the day. So we can definitely control the fee to get the turnover that we want, and we want turnover.
Yes, ma'am.
The second thing I wanted to ask about was, in terms of if it's text to park or you've got an app to use, that's fine for private parking. With a public entity, we try to be as inclusive as we can so that we don't want anybody to come in and say, I don't know how to use the app, so why can't I come to the beach kind of question. So is there, how do you get around that? Do you have a certain place where someone can go to pay at that kind of situation?
Yes. That's how, just very similar to Surf City, North Carolina, where there's no equipment. So if someone is not familiar, doesn't feel comfortable using the app, they can come to our parking office and we can do the transaction for them, or they can call in and we can also do that transaction.
Okay, so
for
you
them.
could call in?
Yes.
Okay, assuming just about everybody has a cell phone these
Yes.
days, so that's certainly fine. So you do work with other municipalities and understand our situation where we want to make money, but that's not our primary goal,
Yes,
okay?
ma'am.
It's to serve the public. Okay. You said equipment maintenance was your responsibility, but you expect us to own the vehicles? Is that what you're saying?
We just did not put that in our proposal. Not sure what was
Okay,
already
either
in
way,
place.
you have we have a choice. I mean,
Yes.
either, okay, thanks, that's what I wanted to do. With with the residential parking, I was particularly interested in that you could do, rather than have people get permit stickers for their cars, that they could just register their vehicles. Is that an annual thing that they do? And do they have to sign up every year, or how easy is that?
It is based on each city or town's rules. In most of our environments where we do that now, they do have to re-register every year, but it's simply once you register the first time, all you have to do is go back into the system, confirm that your current information is current, and then you are confirmed as being re-registered.
So you could either do it online or make a phone call to the police department. Okay, that's easy enough. Okay, and I was just curious about what is the revenue increase you've seen from municipalities where before you came in, what their revenue was, and how much did it increase after your system was in place?
At one of our locations, within our first year, we took over from another parking company. Within our first year, we increased revenue by $500,000.
From what?
The percentage.
Percentage increase.
35% is what I believe it was.
Okay, that's pretty high. Okay, and then you said there would be, from your parking app, you would have data that we would have access to at no cost? All right, that's great. And then the camera citations you were talking about, just an anecdote. They, in the beginning, when they started having cameras at intersections, they would use those to get people running red lights. And they got so many complaints from so many people that had run red lights that they banned the cameras for a while in Charlotte. So the camera citations, have you had any problems with stuff like that with
We
with
have not
backlash?
implemented that particular type of enforcement in any of our locations. sir.
Okay, just
That is just something that is coming through the parking industry, that is being presented, that is now an option that is out there.
Okay. I think that was just my list for now. Thank you.
Okay.
You say you were in Beaufort, North Carolina?
Beaufort.
Beaufort,
Beaufort.
Beaufort, North
I know.
Carolina, or
Carolina.
Beaufort, South Carolina.
Come on, get it right.
I think
the difference.
Yeah, I know. I'm a Tar Heel. I know.
Yeah.
So, well, Beaufort.
Lived here too
Everybody, calm down. Chill. Do you work with Atlantic Beach or Salter Path or Emerald Isle?
We do not right now.
Okay. You said Briceville Beach had 1,800 spaces up there?
Yes, sir.
Does that include all the way up to Figure 8?
It does not. It includes the residential piece up to that point, but it does not include Figure 8.
But it goes up past Holiday Inn.
Yes.
That's a lot of spaces for that little island. But every parking space on that I can remember from Briceville Beach is metered. Are they still metered, or are you using the app?
This, for 2022, Wrightsville Beach took out all meters. So it is no single space or coin-fed meter. There are no meters. They still have the Park-on pay stations.
Right.
But we had the greatest adoption of the text-to-park. So text-to-park transactions exceeded pay station transactions in that environment middle of last year.
I talked to some aldermen, they call them aldermen up there, instead of councilmen or members or whatever, a few years ago before you were involved in. They were very happy. The police department was very happy not to be having to mess with it. So
That is the biggest, and like Surf City, North Carolina, went from a non-paid environment to a paid environment.
Right.
And in their environment, that was their number one key, was to reduce the amount of involvement that the police had to deal with parking.
Right.
And so in the first year, I think the police said they had, in that environment, they had about 800 calls related to parking in one season. And first year we were there, it went down to 20.
Wow. So just a little bit about the process. I'm sure they've informed you of this. We have to go through some hoops. We just have to go to a work session, which is, I believe, the 13th or something.
The 11th.
The 11th. And then we go to full council. So I believe that the chief and Desiree agree that this is something we're going to look at for next year.
Yes, I do have a question, if I may.
Okay.
You showed us a map of the island divided in 3 different zones for enforcement. Could you speak to how many people do you anticipate having on the ground to do the enforcement during the day?
You want to talk to them?
So it's based on need.
Okay.
So typically on a nice summer day, it would be 3 people patrolling 3 different zones. Of course, if it's raining or if it's cloudy and it's not the need, then we wouldn't have that many. But typically it is three guys patrolling 3 zones.
Okay.
All right. We've got
Correct.
one zone, the center zone is where all the parking lots are, where the majority of the paid parking is, so
Yeah,
you
and I
can,
think- I mean, but on the west side zone that we had, there's not much parking down there. So there'll be some overlap. Of course, in the central zone, that is where most of the parking is, so there'll be some overlap.
okay. But we can work that out.
That's just typically, yeah, just typically how we break it down.
Okay.
Very good. I'm sure we'll have a lot more conversations. Unless there's any further questions or comments.
No, I guess I would say in our conversations, if we deem that 3 people may not be enough, that could be part of the conversation too. And, we would anticipate in order to be ready for deployment by next season, I think there's some work to be done by later this year.
Right.
To get it all set up, get signage, get everything in place. So it would, we would need to move forward in the next few months with council to enter into a contract if that's the will of council. But we would anticipate entering into a contract by the end of the year.
Okay, I got one more.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair. One thing I would like for staff to provide is a comparison of the two methods of payment that you have suggested for us in terms of paying them a fee.
Yes, and
What it would compare with what our current situation is with parking.
yes, we have prepared an analysis based on
Okay.
our current expenses and what we anticipate, and it's included in the packet from your budget workshop from last week. So we've provided that already, but we can update that and share it again. It's on the website next to the budget workshop documents.
Okay, I guess what I'd like to see it break into, I saw that, and the breakdown is to what the base fee would be, plus any parking revenue
Yes.
for each. I know one has a base fee, the other one doesn't, and how it compares.
Yeah, we're using our actual numbers from FY '22
Right.
to extrapolate what the different fee structures would look like.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
You're welcome.
Very good. Thank you very
Thank you all
much.
very much.
Very informative.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along, we're going to item B under old business, discussion of changes to the noise ordinance.
Is there, Mr. Chairman, is there anything that we need to do at the committee level as far as parking, as far as voting for it to move on to the next level?
I think
It
a
was just
rec-
presentation, that's all it was.
Okay.
There's no vote according to the agenda.
we could, I mean, if you all want to have this discussion at the workshop meeting, you could have a direction, a motion just to direct us to present that proposal to the workshop.
Well, that's fine unofficially, but I've always looked at the agenda very carefully, and when I see the word consideration, that to me is signaling for a possible vote. But when I hear presentation or discussion, in the past, usually that does not entertain a vote. It's just that this was a presentation. If the council, if the committee would like to make any sort of motion, I would certainly entertain it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we present this presentation to the full council at the workshop.
Yeah, that would be an appropriate motion. You're
We
not
need a second.
approving.
We need a second.
Second,
Okay, any further discussion on this? There being none, all in favor of moving this along to the workshop?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to discussion of changes to the noise ordinance.
okay. So,
Yeah, Desiree, do you want to lead on this, or what are we discussing?
So you're discussing the latest draft of the ordinance. We made some changes to the document based on the direction we received from the committee at the last meeting. I do know that at the last committee meeting, there was a motion that passed unanimously to sort of pause any discussion of the noise ordinance until you receive the report that Wild Dunes is conducting. I
Correct.
do not have a copy of the report. I do not know what the status is. We all know the situation of the representative in Wild Dunes. So I don't know if that is still the will of the committee to not take any further action on this, but I think that there is a desire from the community for action, and we have talked about the challenges that the existing ordinance presents for enforcement when noise complaints are issued. So I would suggest that we bring this before council and at least get the process started so we can have a new ordinance in place that we can, that we can enforce through the season. Because we feel a little like our arms are a little tied, our hands are a bit tied with the current ordinance. We talked about the challenges of enforcing that. And we need a different resource to be able to have our officers, respond to that. So my recommendation is we move forward and I think we had talked about having something in place for about 6 months so we can try it, see what works, see what doesn't, what changes need to happen. But I think we need to get some momentum going because the situation continues to take place, and you can certainly in some areas understand the frustration of the adjacent residents.
So what's happened to the Wild Dunes? They were going to fund a study, and we don't have any information. First off, I'd like to know, when will we know when that study will be complete? And
I do not know.
I think if we made a promise to them that we would wait, that might be something we want to think about.
So the study that they were going to conduct, they were going to hire a sound engineer, and they were going to make recommendations to the hotel about mitigation strategies that they could put in place to minimize the disruption from the pool area to the adjacent owners. Again, we heard from Ms. Hack that I don't think they're going to share the report with us. That's something they're paying for. I would be surprised if they actually share the entire report with the city.
But I asked her specifically, if she wasn't going to share the report, was she going to share us with the results or something to that effect? And I remember getting a positive answer from her that she was, my point is, I'd like to see what the report is before we go any further, but I don't want it to be delayed with the season upon us.
I recall hearing that there would be parts of the report that may be shared. I don't recall. That was my impression. We can, go back to the minutes. But I think regardless of what they end up doing in their property to mitigate noise, I think that would be great, and we're encouraging that. And I think that would be a great path for the hotel to do. But that doesn't change the enforcement piece and whatever rules are put in place by council. The expectations of noise.
Go ahead, Jan.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say there is one more thing we need to address that's outside of this report that's going to be, that we're arguing about with the resort, and that is if we could just pivot to the permits that we were going to allow that were outside of the regulations. And if we could just we can clean this up and have this draft ordinance ready so that we can compare it to what the resort finds from their study. But I think I agree that we need to give the resort an impetus to wrap this thing up. They need a peak season, I think is what they're saying, to measure noise levels. But I don't know if they need a whole peak season. Maybe a peak weekend, like one of their big event weekends is all they need. So let's clean up the rest of this. There's one more issue I think that we need to address, have that ready, and then we can decide whether we want to go ahead and proceed with separate from response from the resort. How does that sound?
Blair?
I'd rather us go on and push it to the workshop, and that creates the impetus to Wild Dunes that the train's leaving, y'all better get busy.
Yeah.
We've got Easter weekend right now coming up.
Yeah.
And we're just going to the workshop, but to go to the workshop, to get an ordinance voted on for first reading, I mean, we got a long way to go to get this in place, so I think we need to get started.
Yeah, I think with the workshop, we have it for discussion only, not for a vote this time.
Yeah, and I've
Certainly.
I've been reading all of this, and I'm learning more and more all the time, but I have a real problem with like 75 decibels. That just seems to be excessive to me. And so that's something, I'm just one person, I'm one of 9, but I think maybe we need some discussion about different zones on the island instead of just one size fits all, one commercial and one residential. So, yeah, I've still got a lot of problems with it,
Okay.
but
Can we
I'm
clean
not
up
at this
one
point
thing?
ready to go forward with a recommendation.
No.
Anyone else?
I mean, I don't think that we're ever going to know, and that we need to do the best we can do, and it's shooting in the dark to a certain extent, put it in place and see how it works, and get input from our police chief and see what happens. So that's 75 decibels may be too high, may not be too high. I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I think we've done a lot of homework ourselves. We've looked at other municipalities and what they have for the different commercial, residential areas. We've discussed it with the chief as to what he's observed as enforceable and whatnot. There is a difference between commercial and residential areas, and I think we've addressed how it will be enforced where there is a boundary with residential up against commercial.
We have?
Yeah,
Remind me, please.
okay. Well, if you look at the,
Yeah, I've seen it.
okay, it says that the measurements are going to be from the boundary line of the complainant, the complaint. So the measurement is gauged by, if the complaint is a residential complaint, then what governs is what the noise limit is for a residential use.
And Councilmember Anderson, if I may, at a recent meeting, we expanded that, the definition of where the noise measurement would be taken, not only the property line, but anywhere around within the boundary of the property of the complainant.
Right, could be
Right.
upstairs,
So if
downstairs, whatever.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
So that was extended. What we've seen in other communities is just along the property line, but I knew that we had
Just
some
have to
concerns
clean,
about
yeah.
that.
Usually the
My-
boundary is the maximum, though. You know,
My
maximum noise
understanding
level.
was for the C2, 75 decibels during daytime for commercial establishments. If you've got a residential person complaining about noise, regardless of where their house is, if they're in a residential zone, the 75 decibels still applies anywhere on their property.
That's correct.
I just have a question. Didn't Mount Pleasant recently change their noise ordinance?
They did. They adopted a noise ordinance that established a limit of 60
60.
during the day. They don't make any distinctions between residential or commercial. It's a blanket 60 decibels during the daytime and 55 during the nighttime. And they have several different times when for the weekend, nighttime.
Well, all municipalities are unique, and so are we. And so I think we just need to do more homework and address this.
Are there any changes to the current draft that's in your packet that you would like to see before we present it to the workshop, or do you want this as written?
I have one change that I'd like to discuss, and that is, the resort did ask that we change, it's under permits for additional application H, and it's item J. Nope, not that one, item C, limits on hours. That, for instance, the resort could apply for permits, special permits, to exceed the limits on noise for a certain amount of time every year. We had just arbitrarily selected 15 hours as what we thought was reasonable. The resort came back and said that they would rather have it by number of days rather than hours.
Yeah, I know.
And they recommended, not that we have to follow this, but they recommended 6 to 10 days a year.
6 to 10.
I would think 5 or 6 would be reasonable.
I just hope that underlying everything, that we remember the people who live in these areas, that
Right.
it's not a party zone to them. They pay a lot of property taxes and insurance, and it's their home, it's where they live. It's not where somebody, they come in for like one weekend a year or every 2 years or something for a wedding. I just wish we could shift our thinking to that side. And another thing, and that's why I've always encouraged that we have the residents, the city, and resort representatives at all of these meetings. I understand everybody's busy and everything, but I would hope it's a three-pronged approach to where we can't reconcile this.
Well, I think in this case, the resort has been participating in our meetings. You've seen
Once.
Terry Hack here. She's been here several times, so maybe you weren't on the committee then.
I don't remember.
But
that.
at this moment, she's got a personal
Yeah, I understand.
issue going on that I think I would respect, and if you don't feel comfortable with it now, that we can postpone till she is, because she isn't even sending a substitute. She wants to be here, to be part of that, and
Understand.
she's the decision maker, so.
Yeah.
I think.
What are your thoughts? We have to give the staff some direction.
I would like to discuss this one issue, and that's it for today, is how we're going to deal with permits. I think when we were talking about 15 hours, we were thinking that would be 5 events a year, 3 hours at a time. I would say just make it 5 days and leave it at that. Or we could just not have any at all, and they could just apply for permits, and as needed, they could be approved, whichever you want. But I think 15 hours was just, according to the resort, would be difficult for them to manage whatever the event.
Is this applicable anywhere else on the island?
The Windjammer.
Yeah. No, the Windjammer's got 85 decibels, which would be the maximum
No,
for
I'm
this
talking about the
area anyway.
days, the hours, the days.
Yeah. that
What
was-
you're specifically talking about. Is anybody else subject to this?
Any of the other commercial areas except for
The marina, the,
Beach Inlet.
Citadel, Beach House.
Right.
Boathouse potentially,
Yeah.
anybody.
The way that it's written, any commercial or residential property could come before city council for an exception, only during daytime hours, and only to be able to exceed the decibel threshold up to 85. So 85 would be the maximum. So
So
that process for a permit would apply to any commercial, not just the hotel, and any residential. So I think that to that in mind, I think we just think about that being applicable across the board.
Okay.
You know,
Very
if
good.
you want to shift from hours to days,
You know,
I think it'd be
Yes,
I mean, I don't have any qualms one way or the other, 15 hours or 5 days, that doesn't bother me. I would like to see us move this on to the workshop because there's a lot of pressure from a number of residents to resolve this.
Yes.
I mean, it's been hanging for months and months and months,
Years.
years and years and years.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I make a motion that we change it from 15 hours to 5
That's a
5 days,
recommendation you have to council.
to recommend to council? That's for us to decide.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So what, the motion again, one more time?
We're
From
going to
it from-
change the limit on hours for permits from 15 hours to 5 days.
Can I make a recommendation that we write it in a way that gives you all the flexibility to decide when you issue a permit, whether you consider the location and the type of event? Because you would be giving a residential property the ability to have an exception for multiple days, and I don't think that's the intent. I understand what you're trying to do. So let me work through some different language that allows you all the opportunity to do that for commercial property, but
That's what it says, commercially used properties.
yes.
So-
It's only commercial.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we, at one point, we had a residential piece to it, so
So
it
if you
may
said
not
5
be.
days, they could go 4 or 6 hours that day, right?
They could.
Okay.
Well, we could also control the same 5 permits.
Yeah, there's a
And then they can come
multiple.
to us on an individual permit, and then maybe it's a 3-hour permit, maybe it's a
Yeah.
5-hour permit, you know, whatever it is.
And they're not automatically entitled to a permit. I
No,
mean, it's up to staff, administration to enforce it the way they think is best for the community.
yeah, it would be up to council to approve a permit, and we would
Okay,
enforce
all right.
that permit.
Are we clear on everything? Are we ready for a vote? All in favor? I think we've done this once before. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye,
Any against? Nay.
okay.
Votes 2-1. Moving on to item C, discussion and consideration of ordinance 23-04, an ordinance increase from 2 to 4 the number of resident parking details that may be issued to non-resident property owners. We've talked about this before. Are there concerns about this or any comments?
Well, my one comment is it was someone that approached us with a concern that they are 6% taxpayers.
Yeah.
They live here part-time. They do not rent their house. They have 2 cars and a golf cart they take to the beach. If they can't get a permit for their golf cart, then they have to take the car to the beach. So it would just be more convenient for them if they could get an extra sticker for the golf cart.
Okay.
Now, we could say 2 motor vehicles, or 2 cars and 2 golf carts, or something like that, if we wanted to be more specific. But the idea was that there are, and this would not be for short-term rentals or anything like that. It's just, I don't know how we could specify it's just for short-term
it's-
homeowners.
It looks like it's clear to me. It says resident parking decals to be used by non-resident property owners. And so resident parking details, it could be a golf cart, it could be a vehicle, a car or a truck. It looks like to me.
Yeah, and you don't need a decal most of the time anyway, because you're driving to your house or to the commercial area, so decals are not an issue. The only time they're an issue is when you're parking in public areas on the island.
Yeah.
It's
So
been-
I'd like to make a motion to approve this. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, discussion.
Yeah, just for the benefit and for some context. So right now, if you're a non-resident property owner, taxed at 6%, you can request a decal, and you have to show proof of residency and vehicle registration. Vehicle registration, oftentimes, because they don't live here full-time, the vehicle is not registered to the license, but the police department does verify that the owner of the vehicle is the same owner of the property, because they have to show proof of ownership as well. I've heard concerns from folks that, believe that this might open up more decals that could be distributed to family members and friends. There's no way for us to stop that, right? I mean, when we issue a decal, they have to show proof of residency and then the vehicle registration. Each decal is assigned to a specific residence and owner, so we do have ways of tracking that by the number on the decal. But that would be the way that it would continue to be enforced. Right now, residents who live here don't have any limits on the number of decals as long as all vehicles are registered to the residents. So that is the main difference between the non-resident property owner decals and full-time residents.
That particular issue of cheating, basically, it would be solved if we hired this parking group, because the decals would then be tied to the license plates.
And
They-
wouldn't need a
They
decal.
are now. The decal is assigned to a specific vehicle. And if it's on a different vehicle, then you're in violation and you get a
That's what we
ticket.
need to do.
But your BSO has to get on the computer or call in to see the license plate and the decal number. It's
Right.
more cumbersome.
That's right.
It
With the
is.
parking people, their
With the
license plate
LPR,
reader,
correct.
boom, it's either is or it isn't. Yeah.
Well, that makes it harder for me, like, to give a decal to my niece, because
Right.
I would have to have,
So you gotta tell your niece she's gotta start walking.
yeah, well, or she's got to use our golf cart,
The only thing that would be different And it just, when we were talking, it occurred to me that the golf cart would have to be registered to the address here to be able to drive it on the island legally. So that would be the one thing that we would want to make sure we tell everybody. They can't register it in Greenville and then bring it down here and drive it. That's a violation of state law.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got to be within 4 miles.
Correct.
That's the perimeter
Yes, sir.
of the,
Register it in Greenville and use that registration to get another
okay, any
decal.
further discussion on this? If there's not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Motion passes. New business, discussion of safety checklist acknowledgement form for a short-term rental application. Had trouble getting that one out.
Okay, and this is,
So this is the last 2 pages in your packet, and we included here the form that we anticipate requiring applicants to receive a short-term rental license to include as part of their application process. This is somewhat different from what the original version you had seen. This it organizes the required actions that, and you can see the section of each code that each of them refers to, and then some suggestions. So it's not a new requirement. Owners are required to comply with those first 4. We are just as an added checklist and added safety check. We would want folks to certify that they acknowledge and comply with those 4 codes. Then the suggestions are just best practices that our fire department has included.
Yeah, I appreciate the fire chief breaking it out between required and recommended,
yeah.
as we had discussed earlier. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, Blair, you had something that you wanted
The
to add?
carbon monoxide detectors, those are battery operated. You can buy those at Lowe's. Was that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, most of them are combined smoke detectors, carbon monoxide now, so they just cost like $10 more.
According to me, it's South Carolina Residential Code, and that's what I was asking for. Any other discussion on this?
So we, just in terms of timing, the chief has had some conversations with folks from the property management group, and we anticipate rolling this out after this renewal process. We're in the middle of renewals now through end of April. So any new applications coming in after April or any renewals that come in after April would be required to fill this form and acknowledge. And as you can see in that second page at the bottom, they're either acknowledging that it's in place today or will be in 90 days. So we're giving them a 3-month grace period to get those things confirmed, because they would have to put eyes on it before they apply. So I think that this
April
is
30th, correct?
after April 30th.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
So the licenses this month then would not have to do this until
Correct.
next year?
That's right, correct.
Okay.
Until next renewal period.
But the required fire safety criteria are code now, so
Yeah.
theoretically, they already meet those requirements, and they just probably wouldn't put their signature on it without checking one more time. I don't know whether this is possible or not, but is there a way to give a A rating or B rating or no rating to properties? A rating would be they meet all of these requirements and recommendations. B rating would be that they meet the requirements but not the recommendations, and no rating would be that they haven't, fall somewhere short of that. Would that run us into any kind of legal jeopardy or anything if we rated things like that?
Well, there is no option to not have the required.
Require one, yeah, they have to
Correct.
have. So, but the recommended ones, they don't have to do. We have no way of enforcing that, even if there's this checklist.
Correct.
It's just
We really have no way of enforcing any of it.
what about code?
Well, I mean, you have code, but there's really no way to enforce it on a day-to-day basis, any of it anyway. I mean, we can tell them you have to do this, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. The battery can go bad, or they can
Yeah.
just cheat it. I mean, that's just, we talked about that last time, that we don't have the ability to enforce this right now. So I don't think we would have the ability to do an extra layer on top of that at this point.
Because, I mean, I know with a lot of these things that it's like a traffic stop. You know, you stop somebody for a burned out taillight,
Right.
and you find all these other violations. And so that's where I think this comes in, you know, if you've got a fire at the house, and then you check for other violations while you're there. It's,
I don't think we'd ask, Chief, if you respond to a residence, are you checking to see if they've complied with these 4 things?
No, well, we are not. If there is a building fire, then part of our investigation that Fire Marshal Stafford would do, he would look at, are there smoke detectors present? You know, did they operate as intended? And then we would look at, you know, where the fire started, you know, cause, origin, all those things. That would be part of our investigation. But if we respond for any other reason, we would not go through and do an assessment. We would assist if there's a smoke detector activation. We would assist, you know, to find the root cause of the problem and assist that property owner or the resident if they're a guest. Okay, the battery's bad in this detector. This is what you need to do, and contact the property manager. So we would help them, but as far as assessing or finding violations, we would not do that.
can you do that?
Ma'am?
Can you do that going forward?
Well, we have 212 businesses on the island, and Fire Marshal Stafford is tasked with inspecting each of those annually. Any new equipment that is put in, he also has to go to those businesses. So we do not have the staff able to do any type of assessment or enforcement.
Even when they're on the property, been called to the property because of a fire or smoke alarm or something like that?
That's different.
They can't automatically, when they're called, I'm talking about being called to a home or a business because of a smoke, let's say the smoke alarm goes off, that they check the smoke alarm and they check these other 3 items that are on our checklist here as code. Only those
So
while they're there.
Right. So our firefighters are focused on just mitigating whatever hazard or whatever assistance they can render to that one point. Now, to your question, we have had recently a few areas where our firefighters, as they're investigating and assisting that resident or that homeowner, they have found like, oh, this door is locked from the inside and it's a means of egress. It shouldn't be locked. They will pass that information on to Fire Marshal Stafford. He will reach out to the rental company and say, hey, we have these items that we have noted that you need to investigate to see if it's something that can be corrected.
I'm talking about the 4 required items on this list only.
You're asking if, in addition to when they're responding to a call,
Right.
if they could
Just-
check and see whether or not, we can look into that, what that would take. I don't know if operationally they can do it with everything else that they would be doing when responding to a call. I think to Councilmember Meyer's point at the workshop, I think the point was to be made, could we pick a handful of properties throughout the year and do random checks? We're looking into that,
Okay.
whether we could. And I think that would solve the concern about enforcement. We certainly
Yeah.
cannot, with our current staffing and our current model, verify that every property that has a rental license complies with this.
No,
This is-
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when it's sort of like, stopping a car because of a taillight. That's not where you stop. It's where you're called because, and this is not for medical emergencies, which are half of our calls, just for the ones that would be smoke or fire related.
The challenge
That you
is-
do the 3 other things, whichever the other ones that happen, just to, if it's not too onerous to do those checks, I don't know.
The fire department doesn't know when they respond to a call, they don't know if they're responding to a property that has a rental license or a property of a full-time resident. So that, it is,
Okay. If it's too complicated,
I don't.
that's all you
we-
need to tell me.
We can, if that is something you all want us to do, we can look into and whether it's feasible or not. But just responding to a call of an alarm, they don't have access to the system that tells them whether that property has a license. If that property is
Okay.
operating as a rental license, they would be required to
Okay.
meet these.
That's-
So I think there's just a couple of nuances that we would need to look at.
Okay,
Um,
thanks. I think you answered.
Great. Anything else?
No.
Next meeting date will be 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 2nd. No reason for executive session that I know of.
No.
There
Motion
being
to
none.
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
11:18.
Get me out.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Now,